The observation station hung in the black void like a silent witness to murder. Inside, Observer Delegate Mireth stood before the massive viewing screen, all four of his arms crossed in the traditional posture of official neutrality. Below on the surface of Kalesh Prime, entire cities burned. Another population center has been eliminated, announced Junior Observer Telvin from her station. Her voice shook slightly. She was new to this duty, having only served 3 cycles in the Concordate's Conflict Resolution Division. Mireth's skin rippled with the colors of resigned acceptance. Document it. All evidence must be preserved for the post-conflict analysis. On the screen, the 2 great fleets faced each other across the orbital plane. The Vorath Imperium had brought 300 crystalline warships, each one gleaming like a shard of captured starlight. Their weapons hummed with power, ready to reduce matter to its component atoms. On the opposite side, the Thrain Collective's bioships pulsed with organic life, living vessels grown in vast spawning pools, covered in chitinous armor and bristling with acid cannons. Below them, caught between 2 ancient empires, the native Kaleshi died by the millions. The Vorath have deployed atmospheric incendiaries over the southern continent, Telvin reported. Her hands trembled as she entered the data. Estimated casualties, 4.7 million civilians. Continue monitoring. Mireth responded automatically. The Kalesh system had become a protected conflict zone 6 months ago. When both empires claimed the world below, the planet sat on a strategic hyperspace junction, valuable to both powers. Rather than risk a war that could devastate half the galaxy, the Concordate Council had invoked the sacred protocol of contained resolution. The 2 empires could fight here in this system, following certain rules. The winner would claim the territory. The loser would withdraw. No other species could interfere. It was civilized. It was orderly. It had been done this way for thousands of years. The Kaleshi, who had no voice in the Concordate, had not been consulted. They're firing on the refugee columns again, Telvin whispered. On the screen, a line of desperate civilians fleeing toward the mountains disappeared in a flash of plasma fire. The Thrain Swarm Mother had decided that mobile targets were acceptable practice for her warriors. Mireth's skin flickered with colors he quickly suppressed. Disgust was not an appropriate emotion for a Concordate observer. Document and continue. With respect, Observer Delegate, Telvin said, her voice barely audible. How many more must die before this ends? Until one side achieves victory according to the established parameters, Mireth answered. It was the correct answer. The only answer allowed. On the planet below, the Kaleshi had achieved early industrial civilization. They had built cities of stone and metal, created art that rivaled the finest in Concordate space, and developed a complex philosophy about the nature of existence. They had been on the verge of splitting the atom when the first alien warships arrived in their sky. Now their cities were craters, their art burned to ash, and their philosophers lay dead in the streets. Fleet Commander Jakor of the Vorath addressed his bridge crew with confidence. His crystalline body refracted light from the command displays, creating rainbow patterns on the walls. The Thrain will break within another cycle. Their bioships cannot sustain this level of combat without resupply. His tactical officer, a younger Vorath named Sethis, gestured toward the planet. Commander, the native population centers continue to interfere with our targeting solutions. Perhaps if we evacuated them to irrelevant, Jakor interrupted. The Kaleshi are not Concordate members. They have no voice in this resolution. If they are destroyed as a consequence of legitimate military action, that is their misfortune. He had said these words so many times they had become automatic, meaningless. Across the orbital divide, Swarm Mother Caxthal thought similar thoughts. She crouched in the living flesh of her flagship's command chamber, her compound eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. The Vorath had superior numbers, but Thrain bioships could regenerate damage. It would be a long conflict, but she had time. The creatures below the Kaleshi were simply obstacles, soft things that broke easily when caught between greater powers. Back on the observation station, Telvin worked late into the cycle, long after Mireth had retired to his quarters. She reviewed the data they had collected, the endless documentation of atrocity. The Concordate would examine it all after the conflict ended, would write reports and perhaps issue stern recommendations about the use of prohibited weapons. None of it would bring back the dead. She pulled up images of the Kalishi from before the conflict began. They were tall, slender beings with 4 eyes and beautiful bioluminescent patterns on their skin that changed with their emotions. They had sent out primitive radio broadcasts, music and stories, dreams transmitted to the stars. They had hoped someone might be listening. Someone had been listening. The Concordat had cataloged them, studied them, and then designated their world as an acceptable battlefield. Telvin's hands moved across her console before she fully realized what she was doing. She accessed the long-range communications array, the one used to report to Concordat headquarters. She bypassed the security protocols with codes she wasn't supposed to have. Codes she had copied months ago when she first understood what her job really meant. She crafted a message, not to the Concordat but outward, into deep space toward regions where younger species lived, species that might not yet understand that the galaxy was ruled by laws that valued order over life. "This is Junior Observer Telvin of Concordat Station Kalesh 9, she transmitted. "I am sending this without authorization. A genocide is occurring in the Kalesh system. Coordinates attached. 2 major powers are destroying an entire civilization while the Concordat watches. I don't know if anyone is listening. I don't know if anyone cares. But I had to try." She attached all the data. Every image of burning cities and murdered civilians. Every piece of evidence that her superiors collected but did nothing about. Then she sent it outward. A bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. A desperate hope that somewhere, someone might answer. The message traveled through hyperspace, bouncing off relay stations, spreading through the communications network that connected thousands of worlds. Most species that received it deleted it immediately. Unauthorized transmissions were illegal. Interfering in a sacred protocol conflict was unthinkable. But the message kept traveling, jumping from system to system, until 6 days later it reached a region of space where a young species had recently established its first interstellar colonies. The humans called it the Outer Territories. And in the Outer Territories, the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was conducting routine patrols when a communications officer aboard the UHSV Indomitable noticed an unusual signal. "Admiral Kowalski," the officer called out. "You need to see this." Admiral Sarah Kowalski was in her quarters reviewing supply reports when the call came. She had been in space for 30 years, had seen first contact with 5 alien species, and had learned that the galaxy was far stranger and more dangerous than humanity had ever imagined. But she had never seen anything like the message that waited for her on the bridge. She watched the footage in silence, the burning cities, the fleeing civilians cut down by weapons beyond their comprehension. The 2 massive fleets treating an entire world as their personal arena. "How far?" she asked quietly. 6 days at maximum jump speed, her navigation officer replied. "Get me the Concordat embassy. I want to know what the hell is happening in that system." The answer she received was worse than she expected. It was legal. It was sanctioned. It was protected by laws older than human civilization. No one was supposed to interfere. Kowalski stood on her bridge, watching the footage loop on the screen, and made a decision that would change everything. The conference room aboard the UHSV Indomitable was filled with tension. Admiral Sarah Kowalski sat at the head of the table, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. Around her, the senior officers of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet waited in silence. Captain Marcus Chen was the first to speak. "Admiral, I need to say this clearly. If we intervene in that system, we risk everything. The Concordat could expel us. We could face sanctions that would cripple Earth's economy. We might even trigger a war with species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years while we were still living in caves." "I'm aware of the risks, Marcus," Kowalski replied. "Are you?" Chen leaned forward, his voice urgent. "We've been part of the galactic community for 80 years. 80 years. We're infants compared to these civilizations. They have rules, protocols that have kept the peace for millennia. Who are we to throw that away?" Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the fleet's senior xenoanthropologist, cleared her throat. "I've been studying the data from that transmission. The Kaleshi are remarkable. Their art, their philosophy, their entire culture is built around concepts of harmony and understanding. They have no concept of war on this scale. They don't even have a word for genocide in their language." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "They did have such a word. Past tense. They invented it 6 months ago." Commander James Rodriguez, head of fleet security, drummed his fingers on the table. "The tactical situation is a nightmare. 2 major Empire fleets, hundreds of ships between them. We have 47 vessels. Even with our technological advantages, we'd be massively outnumbered. But not outmatched, said Commander Lisa Park from Engineering. Our weapons systems are different from theirs. They've been fighting each other for so long. They've adapted to counter each other's technology. They won't be ready for kinetic weapons, for railguns that don't care about energy shields designed to stop plasma. That's not the point, Chen insisted. Even if we could win, and that's a big if, we'd be violating their most sacred laws. The galaxy runs on these protocols. Without them, there's chaos. Kowalski finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Show me the footage again. The main screen activated. They all watched in silence as a Kaleshi city burned. The aliens had 4 eyes. And in the final moments before the plasma strike hit, every eye was turned skyward, looking for salvation that never came. Children, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with terror, clung to parents who could offer no protection. Again, Kowalski said. They watched another clip, a refugee column being strafed from orbit, bodies scattered across a road. A young Kaleshi, barely more than a juvenile, crawling toward a fallen adult, its light patterns pulsing with distress calls that no one would answer. Kowalski stood up slowly. I joined the service 40 years ago because I believed humanity had a responsibility, not just to ourselves but to the idea that some things are right and some things are wrong, that when you have the power to stop something evil, you have the duty to try. Admiral, Chen began. I'm not finished, Captain. Kowalski's eyes moved around the table, meeting each officer's gaze. We've spent 80 years trying to fit into galactic society, learning their rules, following their protocols, being good little newcomers who don't make waves. And in that time, we've watched them maintain their order through compromise and convenience. She gestured to the screen. This is what their order looks like. This is the price of their precious protocols. An entire civilization being erased because it's convenient for 2 empires to have a designated killing ground. Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. The Concordate's entire philosophy is built on preventing large-scale wars between major powers. They've achieved that by creating pressure release valves, contained conflicts where empires can fight without endangering the broader peace. And the species that happen to live in those pressure valves? Kowalski asked. They're just acceptable losses. That's how they see it, Tanaka confirmed. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. One pre-spaceflight civilization versus galactic stability. Commander Rodriguez spoke up. Admiral, I'll follow whatever orders you give, but I need to know we're going into this with clear heads. The Concordate will call us criminals. They'll say we've destabilized the peace. Are we prepared for that? Kowalski walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. You know what humanity's reputation is in Concordate space? We're the unpredictable ones, the emotional ones, too quick to fight, too slow to think. They treat us like children playing with adult tools. She turned back to face them. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are too emotional. Maybe we do act before we think. But you know what? I'd rather be emotional and right than logical and wrong. I'd rather be the species that fights impossible odds to save people we've never met than the species that watches genocide from a comfortable distance and calls it civilization. Chen sighed heavily. You've made up your mind. I have. But I won't order anyone to follow me into this. Every ship captain needs to make their own choice. We're going to Kalesh Prime. Any vessel that wants to return to Earth space is free to do so, no questions asked, no consequences. She activated the fleet-wide communications. This is Admiral Kowalski to all ships. You've all seen the footage from Kalesh Prime. You know what's happening there. You also know that interfering with a sacred protocol conflict could mean the end of Earth's relationship with the Concordate. It could mean sanctions, isolation, or worse. Her voice hardened. I'm taking the Indomitable to that system. I'm going to put my ship between those empires and the innocents they're slaughtering. I'm probably going to violate a dozen galactic laws doing it, and I'm going to sleep well knowing I made that choice. She paused. Any ship that wants to come with me, set course for Kalesh Prime, maximum jump speed. Anyone who thinks I'm making a mistake, head back to Earth. You have 2 hours to decide. Kowalski out. The conference room was silent after she cut the transmission. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. You know half the fleet is going to hate you for putting them in this position. Only half? Kowalski asked. The other half already hates you for making them feel like cowards if they don't come. Dr. Tanaka stood up. For what it's worth, Admiral, the Kalishi have a concept in their philosophy. Roughly translated, it means the one who stands when all others kneel. It's their highest form of respect. Let's hope we live long enough for them to use it, Kowalski replied. 2 hours later, the fleet's status reports came in. Not a single ship had turned back. Every captain, every crew had voted to continue to Kalesh Prime. Commander Park appeared on the screen from engineering. Jump drives are charged and ready, Admiral. We can make the transit in 6 days if we push the engines hard. Do it, Kowalski ordered. And Park? Make sure every weapon system is at peak efficiency when we arrive. I have a feeling we're going to need them. The third expeditionary fleet vanished into hyperspace, 47 human warships racing toward a conflict that wasn't their fight, toward a people they'd never met, toward a confrontation that would either change everything or destroy them. In her quarters later that night, Kowalski pulled up the file on concordant law that covered sacred protocol conflicts. She read the penalties for interference, expulsion, sanctions, possible military response from member species. Then she pulled up the message from junior observer Telvin again, watched the cities burn, watched the innocents die. She closed both files and began writing orders for the fleet's arrival at Kalesh Prime. No one was supposed to interfere. But Sarah Kowalski had never been very good at following rules she didn't believe in. The question wasn't whether they would interfere. The question was whether 47 human ships could make a difference against hundreds. In 6 days, they would find out. The alarms on Concordat Station Kalesh 9 began screaming at the exact moment the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. Observer Delegate Mireth rushed to the command center, his forearms gesturing frantically. What is happening? Have the Vorath broken protocol? Has the Thrain deployed prohibited weapons? Neither, Observer Delegate. The sensor operator replied, her voice filled with disbelief. We have new contacts. 47 vessels. Unknown configuration. They're broadcasting identity codes as the United Human Systems 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Myreth's skin turned the pale color of shock. Humans here? That's impossible. This is a protected conflict zone. They know they cannot. He stopped, understanding flooding through him. Someone sent them a message. On the planet below, another Kalishi city was in the process of being destroyed. Thrain bioships were systematically dissolving its buildings with acid weapons, while Vorath fighters strafed the fleeing population. It was just another day in the 6-month-long nightmare, but in orbit everything had changed. Fleet Commander Jakor of the Vorath received the alert, and immediately brought his fleet to high alert. Identify these vessels. They match the profile of human warships, Commander. A minor species from the outer regions. They have been concordant members for approximately 80 standard cycles. Jakor's crystalline body flashed with the colors of amusement. 47 ships? They dare enter a conflict zone with such a pitiful force? Open a channel. I will educate these primitives about their place. Before he could transmit, the Concordat station broadcast to all vessels in the system. Mireth's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. Attention, unidentified human fleet. You are in violation of Concordat Statute 7.3, Article 12. This is a designated protected conflict zone. Your presence here violates the sacred protocol of contained resolution. You must withdraw immediately or face severe consequences. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kowalski listened to the transmission without expression. Captain Chen stood beside her, watching the tactical display that showed them hopelessly outnumbered. They're right, you know, Chen said quietly. We are violating their laws. I know, Kowalski replied. Open a channel to the Concordat station. When the channel opened, Kowalski spoke clearly and calmly. Concordat Station Kalesh 9, this is Admiral Sarah Kowalski of the United Human Systems. We received a distress signal from this system indicating a humanitarian crisis in progress. We are responding to that call for help. Mireth's voice crackled with outrage. There is no humanitarian crisis. This is a legitimate conflict resolution between two concordant member empires. The Kaleshi are not members and therefore not protected under— I've read your laws, Observer Delegate, Kowalski interrupted. I know what they say. I'm here to tell you that we don't care. We're looking at footage of genocide. We're watching an entire civilization being erased, and we're putting a stop to it. The communication channel exploded with multiple voices. Jakor was demanding the humans withdraw. Swarm Mother Caxthal was threatening to destroy the human fleet. Mireth was citing legal precedents that were older than human writing. Kowalski let them talk for exactly 30 seconds. Then she cut through the noise. All forces in the Kalesh system, this is Admiral Kowalski. You have 1 hour to cease all military operations against the Kaleshi population and withdraw to high orbit. After 1 hour, any vessel engaging in hostile action against civilians will be considered a legitimate military target. The communication channels went silent for a moment. Then Jakor's laughter echoed through the void. You threaten us? You with your handful of primitive vessels threaten the Vorath Imperium? Your ignorance is almost charming. I'm not threatening you, Fleet Commander, Kowalski replied. I'm informing you of the reality. Stop killing civilians or we will stop you. Swarm Mother Kexthal's voice joined the conversation, her words clicking and hissing through the translator. The Thrain Collective does not take orders from inferior species. You are irrelevant to this conflict. Your interference will be noted and punished. Kowalski turned to her weapons officer. Commander Park, what's the status of our railgun batteries? Charged and ready, Admiral, Park replied with a slight smile. Target locks are solid. Good. Kowalski leaned forward in her command chair. Fleet Commander Jakor, Swarm Mother Kexthal, I want you to understand something about humans. We're new to your galactic community. We're young, we're inexperienced, and we don't have thousands of years of tradition guiding our actions. What we do have is a very simple principle. We don't watch innocent people die when we can do something about it. She checked the chronometer. You now have 58 minutes to comply. I suggest you use them wisely. On the Vorath flagship, Jakor consulted with his tactical staff. Analysis of human vessels? His officer gestured to the displays. Their ships are smaller than ours, Commander. Their technology appears to be conventional fusion drives and kinetic weapons, nothing that suggests they pose a significant threat. Then we will ignore them, Jakor decided. Continue operations against the Kaleshi strongholds. If the humans interfere, destroy them as an example. The Thrain reached a similar conclusion. Swarm Mother Kexthal had no interest in delaying her assault for the sake of a minor species with delusions of importance. The hour passed. Below on Kalesh Prime, a fresh bombardment began. A Kaleshi settlement housing 50,000 civilians disappeared under Vorath plasma fire. Target acquired, Commander Park reported. The Vorath flagship bearing 273 Mark IV. Fire, Kowalski ordered. The Indomitable's main railguns spoke with thunder. Solid projectiles accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossed the distance to the Vorath flagship in seconds. The Vorath shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, barely registered the kinetic rounds before they punched through. The shots weren't meant to destroy. They were meant to disable. The projectiles tore through the flagship's command section, destroying their primary control systems but leaving the crew alive. Simultaneously, 12 other human destroyers opened fire on Thrain bioships. Railgun rounds and missile swarms overwhelmed their organic defenses. Acid cannons melted and command chambers ruptured. Within 30 seconds, both flagships were crippled and drifting. The alien fleets erupted in chaos. No one had expected the humans to actually attack. No one had believed they could do significant damage. Both assumptions proved catastrophically wrong. All human vessels break formation Alpha, Kowalski commanded. Engage targets of opportunity. Rules of engagement, disable only. We're not here to conquer. We're here to protect. The human fleet scattered across the orbital plane like a swarm of angry hornets. The aliens had hundreds of ships, but they fought with rigid tactics honed over centuries of warfare against each other. The humans fought like humans had always fought, with improvisation, aggression, and a complete disregard for what was considered honorable. Human fighters used debris fields for cover, emerging to strike and disappearing before return fire could find them. Destroyers worked in packs, coordinating their attacks with a flexibility that bewildered the aliens. Cyber warfare specialists hacked into both alien fleets' communication networks, creating confusion and false orders. Captain Chen watched the tactical display with a mixture of admiration and horror. We're actually holding them. For now, Kowalski agreed. But we can't keep this up indefinitely. Park, deploy the marine transports. Get our people on the ground. Admiral, that's an order, Captain. Those Kaleshi need protection, and we're going to give it to them. 20 transport ships broke from the fleet and dove toward the planet's surface. Thrain interceptors moved to stop them, but human fighters swarmed the bioships, trading fire in a desperate effort to keep the transports safe. 2 transports were hit and fell from the sky, their crews lost, but 18 made it through, landing in areas where Kaleshi refugees were gathered. Major Rebecca Torres was first off her transport, her combat armor gleaming in the alien sun. Around her, thousands of Kaleshi stared at the humans with their 4 eyes wide. "Set up a perimeter," Torres ordered. "Nothing gets through to these people. Nothing." A young Kaleshi approached cautiously, its bioluminescent patterns flickering with patterns the translator couldn't interpret. It spoke in its musical language, and Torres's helmet provided a translation. "Are you the ones from the sky message? The ones who came to help?" Torres looked at the frightened civilians, at the families huddled together, at the children who had known nothing but war for half their lives. She thought about all the regulations they were breaking, all the laws they were violating. "Yeah," she said finally. "We're the ones, and we're not going anywhere." Above in orbit, the battle continued. The humans were outnumbered 8-1, outgunned and fighting 2 empires simultaneously. By every tactical assessment, they should have been destroyed in the first exchange. But they weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for something both alien fleets had forgotten how to value. They were fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, and that made all the difference. The battle for Kalesh Prime had been raging for 3 hours. The UHSV Indomitable shuddered as another plasma blast glanced off its shields. Admiral Kowalski gripped her command chair, watching the tactical display as it painted a picture of controlled chaos. "Shield strength at 40%, Commander Park reported from engineering. "We can't take many more hits like that." "The Defiant is venting atmosphere from Deck 7, Captain Chen added, reading reports from across the fleet. "The Resilience has lost main power. The Endeavor is down to maneuvering thrusters only." Kowalski studied the display. They had hurt the alien fleets badly in the initial engagement. But the numbers game was catching up. For every alien ship they disabled, 2 more moved into position. The Vorath and Thrain had stopped fighting each other entirely, united in their outrage at human interference. Status on the ground forces: Major Torres reports secure perimeters around 3 refugee centers. She's requesting air support. Thrain ground forces are trying to push through to finish off the civilians. Tell her we're sending what we can. Kowalski turned to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Morrison, detach the strike fighters from escort duty. Send them to support the ground troops. Admiral, that will leave our capital ships vulnerable." "I know. Do it anyway." On the planet's surface, Major Torres crouched behind a barrier of fused stone, her rifle trained on the approaching Thrain warriors. The insectoid aliens moved in coordinated swarms, their mandibles clicking as they advanced. Behind Torres, 5,000 Kaleshi huddled in what remained of an ancient temple. "Contact, 200 meters, her sergeant called out. "Full swarm formation. Hold your fire until they're in effective range," Torres ordered. "Make every shot count." The Thrain warriors were terrifying up close. Each one stood 3 meters tall, covered in chitinous armor that could turn aside most small arms fire. They moved with inhuman speed, driven by a hive intelligence that left no room for fear or hesitation. Torres had fought many enemies in her career. She'd never fought anything quite like this. "Fire!" The human Marines opened up with their rifles, targeting the joints in the Thrain armor. The aliens fell, but more replaced them immediately. The swarm kept coming, driven by orders from their swarm mother in orbit. Eliminate the humans, eliminate the Kaleshi, restore the proper order of the conflict. Then the sky screamed. Human strike fighters dove from the clouds, their cannons roaring. The fighters had been designed for ship-to-ship combat, but their pilots adapted on the fly, using their speed and maneuverability to strafe the Thrain ground forces. The alien swarm broke and scattered, seeking cover from the aerial assault. It gave Torres and her Marines the breathing room they needed. "Get those civilians deeper into the temple," she ordered. "We're holding this position." A young Kaleshi approached her cautiously. Through her helmet translator, its words came through. "Why do you fight for us?" "We cannot repay this debt. We have nothing to offer you." Torres looked at the alien, at its 4 eyes filled with confusion and hope. "You don't owe us anything. This is what we do. But your ships are being destroyed. Your warriors are dying. For what purpose?" "Because it's right," Torres said simply. "That's enough." The Kaleshi stared at her for a long moment, Then its bioluminescent pattern shifted to colors the translator identified as profound gratitude mixed with sorrow. It said something that the translator struggled with, finally rendering as, "You are the Sky Guardians from the old stories. We thought they were myths." Before Torres could respond, the Thrain attacked again. In orbit, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Indomitable had taken 3 direct hits and fires burned on decks 4 and 5. The Vorath fleet was pressing hard, using their numerical advantage to surround isolated human vessels. "The Valiant is breaking up," Chen reported, his voice tight. "They're ordering abandon ship." Kowalski watched the tactical display as the destroyer came apart under concentrated fire. Escape pods launched, but several were caught by plasma fire before they could reach safety. 200 crew members gone in seconds. "We can't sustain this," Chen said quietly. "Sarah, we need to withdraw. We've made our point. If we stay, we'll lose the entire fleet. And what happens to the people on the ground? To the Kalishi and those refugee centers? They'll die. But so will we if we don't pull back." Kowalski's hands clenched on the arms of her chair. She had known this moment would come, had known that good intentions and moral clarity wouldn't be enough against superior numbers, but knowing it and accepting it were different things. "Hail the Vorath commander," she ordered, "and the Thrain swarm mother. Conference channel." When both alien commanders appeared on her screen, Kowalski spoke before either could begin their inevitable demands for surrender. "This is Admiral Kowalski. I'm offering you both one final chance to end this peacefully." Shakor's crystalline form flickered with the colors of contempt. His flagship had been repaired enough to restore basic functions, but the damage to his pride remained fresh. "You are in no position to offer anything, human. Your fleet is dying. Your interference has failed. Withdraw now and perhaps we will allow you to survive." Swarm Mother Kexthal's compound eyes fixed on Kowalski with alien calculation. "The Thrain Collective agrees. Your resistance is admirable but futile. You have demonstrated courage. Now demonstrate wisdom and retreat." "I'm not talking about us retreating," Kowalski said. "I'm talking about you both withdrawing from this system entirely. Take your fleets and go. Let the Kaleshi live in peace." Both alien commanders reacted with what could only be called astonishment. Jakor spoke first. "You have lost this battle and yet you make demands? Your species truly is as irrational as reports suggest." "Maybe we are," Kowalski agreed. "But here's what you need to understand. We're not leaving. You can destroy every ship in my fleet, but we'll keep fighting. You can kill every Marine on the ground, but they'll keep fighting. We'll make this the most expensive victory you've ever achieved." "Threats from a position of weakness accomplish nothing," Kexthal observed. "It's not a threat. It's a fact." Kowalski leaned forward. "But it's also not the whole story. See, while we've been fighting, this battle has been broadcast across concordate space. Every species in the galaxy is watching right now. They're watching you both systematically exterminate a peaceful civilization. They're watching a handful of humans sacrifice themselves trying to stop you." She paused, letting that sink in. "How do you think that looks? 2 ancient empires with all their power and prestige, barely holding their own against 47 human ships. And those humans? They're only here because they care about people you're treating as irrelevant obstacles." Jakor's colors shifted to something that might have been uncertainty. "The Concordat understands the necessity of—" "The Concordat leadership might understand," Kowalski interrupted. "But what about everyone else? What about all those populations watching their government stand by while genocide happens? What about all those species that joined the Concordat believing it stood for civilization and order?" She gestured to her tactical display. "Right now we're making you both look like monsters, and we're making the Concordat look complicit. Is that really worth one strategic system?" There was a long silence. Captain Chen looked at Kowalski with something approaching awe. She wasn't just fighting a military battle. She was fighting for the narrative, for the story that would be told about this day. Finally, Jakor spoke. "You suggest we simply abandon our claim to this system? After months of conflict? The Vorath Imperium does not surrender." "I'm not asking you to surrender," Kowalski said. "I'm asking you to show mercy. Demonstrate that you're capable of valuing life over territory. That's not weakness. That's strength." Swarm Mother Kexthal's voice was thoughtful. "The human admiral makes a compelling argument. The Thrain Collective has achieved many victories. We have proven our military superiority. Perhaps there is no further honor in this particular conflict. The Vorath will not be seen as weak," Jakor insisted. But his tone had changed. He was no longer certain. Then leave together, Kowalski suggested. Make it a joint decision. Tell the Concordat that both empires have chosen to spare the Kaleshi out of respect for civilized conduct. Turn this into a story about wisdom rather than defeat. On the planet below, Major Torres received a strange order from orbit. Ceasefire. Maintain defensive positions but do not engage unless attacked. Stand by. What's happening? Her sergeant asked. I think the Admiral just pulled off a miracle, Torres replied, hardly daring to believe it. The alien fleets held their positions. Minutes stretched into eternities. The Kaleshi refugees watched the sky, not knowing if the next moment would bring death or deliverance. Then, slowly, the Vorath and Thrain fleets began to withdraw to high orbit. The bombardment stopped. The ground forces pulled back. The battle was over. Kowalski slumped in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had done it. Fleet-wide channel, she ordered. All ships maintain position but stand down from combat alert. Begin damage assessment and rescue operations. Someone get those escape pods picked up. Chen was smiling, actually smiling. Sarah, that was... Don't, she interrupted. We lost good people today. The Valiant, the transports that didn't make it. This isn't a victory to celebrate. Maybe not, Chen agreed. But it's a victor. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Sarah Kowalski stood in the council chamber of the Galactic Concordat. The chamber was vast, designed to accommodate hundreds of species in an array of different atmospheric conditions and gravity fields. It was a monument to diversity and cooperation, built to remind everyone of the civilization they had achieved together. Right now, it felt like a courtroom. The council consisted of representatives from 47 major species, with hundreds of observer delegations filling the galleries. Every eye of every type imaginable was focused on Kowalski, as she stood alone in the center of the chamber. The speaker, an ancient being from a species whose name humans couldn't pronounce, addressed her with a voice that resonated through multiple translation systems. Admiral Sarah Kowalski of the United Human Systems, you have been summoned to answer for your actions in the Kalesh system. The charges are severe. Violation of Concordat Statute 7.3, unauthorized military intervention in a protected conflict zone, destabilization of sanctioned conflict resolution protocols, and causing harm to 2 member empires' military forces. Kowalski stood at attention, her uniform crisp despite the long journey to the Concordat homeworld. She had refused legal representation, refused to prepare a defense, refused to do anything except tell the truth. I understand the charges, she said simply. Do you deny them? No, I violated your laws. I knew I was violating them when I gave the order. I'd do it again. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The speaker's form shifted in what might have been surprise. You admit your guilt and express no remorse. I admit I broke your rules, Kowalski clarified. I don't admit guilt because I don't believe what I did was wrong. Your laws required me to watch genocide. I chose to stop it instead. The Vorath delegate rose, his crystalline body flashing with angry colors. The human admiral demonstrates the arrogance typical of her species. The sacred protocol has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 cycles. One does not simply discard such traditions because of emotional reactions to unfortunate necessities. Unfortunate necessities, Kowalski repeated. Is that what you call the murder of billions? The Kaleshi population before your conflict began was 8 billion. When my fleet arrived, it was down to 3 billion. 5 billion people dead, because they happened to live on a world you wanted. They were casualties of a legitimate conflict, the Vorath delegate insisted. They were civilians, children, artists, philosophers, people who had never done anything to either of your empires except exist. In the wrong place, the Thrain delegate spoke. Her clicking voice translated into standard language. The Kaleshi were not Concordat members. They had no standing, no voice in our affairs. To disrupt an established protocol for the sake of non-members is to threaten the entire foundation of galactic order. Kowalski turned to face the Thrain delegation. If your foundation requires the mass murder of innocents, then maybe it's time to build a new foundation. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, some supporting Kowalski, others demanding immediate punishment. The speaker called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. When silence finally returned, another delegate stood. This one was from a species humanity had little contact with, the Viridian Collective. Their representative spoke with careful precision. The human makes an uncomfortable point. The Concordat has long prided itself on civilized conduct. Yet our sacred protocols create zones where civilization is suspended, where beings can be slaughtered simply because they lack political representation. The protocols prevent larger wars, the Vorath delegate argued. They channel conflict into controlled areas, protecting the majority of the galaxy from devastation. By sacrificing the minority, the Viridian continued, we have traded wholesale destruction for retail genocide. We have made peace through the selective application of horror. The speaker gestured for calm. These philosophical debates are beyond the scope of these proceedings. We are here to determine the fate of Admiral Kowalski and the human species standing in the Concordat. Then let me make it simple for you, Kowalski said. I knew the risks. I knew we might be expelled, sanctioned, or worse. I accepted those consequences because some things matter more than politics. If you need to punish someone, punish me. But the people of Earth? They deserve better than to be held responsible for one admiral's decision. Captain Chen, watching from the observation gallery, felt a surge of pride. Kowalski was falling on her sword, trying to protect humanity from the fallout of her choice. But she wasn't alone. The gallery erupted as dozens of observers stood. Species from across the Concordat, populations who had no official voice but had been watching the footage from Kalesh Prime, began a gesture that transcended culture. They applauded. The speaker called for order again, but the applause continued. It spread through the chamber, from observers to some of the junior delegates from species who remembered what it was like to be weak and unprotected. Finally, the speaker's voice boomed through the space. Order! This council will have order! The applause stopped, but the message had been sent. Whatever the official judgment, popular opinion was clearly divided. A new figure entered the chamber, and Kowalski felt her heart sink. It was Fleet Commander Jakor himself, come to testify against her. But when the Vorath commander spoke, his words were not what she expected. The human admiral violated our sacred laws, Jakor began. She interfered in a conflict that was not hers. She attacked vessels of two sovereign empires without provocation. He paused, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's light. She also demonstrated a quality that we Vorath claim to value above all others: honor. The chamber went silent. I fought the humans, Jakor continued. I witnessed their tactics, their determination, their willingness to die for beings they had never met. And I was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Vorath had forgotten what honor truly means. We had confused procedure with principle, tradition with morality. He turned to face Kowalski directly. The human admiral made me question what we were doing in that system, whether winning a piece of territory was worth the price we were paying in innocent lives. The Vorath Imperium has decided to support a reform of the sacred protocols. Conflicts may still occur, but they will no longer be permitted on inhabited worlds where pre-spaceflight civilizations reside. Swarm Mother Kexthal rose from the Thrain delegation. The collective concurs. The humans showed us that strength and compassion are not mutually exclusive, that true power includes the courage to show mercy. The speaker seemed overwhelmed by this development. The council recognizes the statements from both empires. However, the violation of law still stands. Admiral Kowalski still acted outside Concordat authority. Then change the law, came a voice from the gallery. It was Junior Observer Telvin, the one who had sent the original distress call. She stood shakily, knowing this would likely end her career. I sent that message. I violated protocol because I couldn't stand by and watch anymore. If the law requires good people to do nothing while evil happens, then the law's wrong. Observer Delegate Mireth stood beside her. I hereby submit my resignation from the Conflict Resolution Division. I can no longer serve an organization that values procedure over life. More voices joined them. Delegates from smaller species, those who remembered being weak and vulnerable, began calling for reform. The speaker raised his appendages for silence. This council will take a recess to consider these developments. Admiral Kowalski will remain in custody pending our decision. The recess lasted 3 days. During that time, the galaxy watched and waited. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. The footage from Kalesh Prime played on every news network, showing the human fleet standing alone against impossible odds, showing Marines protecting refugees, showing one species willing to risk everything for strangers. Humanity had become a symbol, not of military might or technological superiority, but of something the Concordat had almost forgotten: moral courage. When the council reconvened, the speaker's announcement was carefully worded. The council has reached a decision. Admiral Sarah Kowalski is hereby censured for violation of Concordat law. The United Human Systems will be required to submit their military protocols for review. A pause, then the real verdict. However, in recognition of the extraordinary circumstances and the humanitarian nature of the intervention, no further penalties will be imposed. Additionally, the Council has voted to establish the Sapient Protection Clause, which will prohibit sanctioned conflicts on worlds inhabited by pre-spaceflight civilizations. This clause will be informally known as the Kowalski Provision. The chamber erupted again, this time with genuine celebration from many delegations. The speaker continued. Furthermore, the Kalishi have been granted immediate protection under Concordat law. The United Human Systems have been designated as their sponsors.